Renault Megane Etech. This is a plug-in hybrid, which means that you have a gas engine at the front and also two electric motors. But the interesting thing is, this car uses Formula 1 technology because it's got a clutch that's not really a clutch, but it's called a torque clutch. I'm not really sure how it works, nor is Renault apparently, but the cool thing is you can drive like a Formula 1 driver. Well, not really, especially because it's a hybrid and you want to drive slowly. But anyway, the very important thing is here, if you're thinking of buying a plug-in hybrid, but you will never actually plug it in to charge it, then you're actually much worse off monetarily, emissions-wise, and well, consumption-wise, than if you were to buy a mild hybrid. This hybrid Megane isn't showing its cards on the outside. The only real clues you'll get are the blue badges on the wheels and one at the back. There's a nice digital instrument cluster behind the steering wheel. Yes, the protective plastics are a bit dirty here, but you can display a lot of info on the screen, including navigation. And a surprise, these current Renault's infotainment systems have physical buttons for the climate controls. That's what we like. Well, at the back, in the trunk, because it is a plug-in hybrid, you of course get a couple of bags, well, two of these, with your charging cables, which is quite nice that they give you bags for this, because otherwise, well, you just sort of throw those cables in because they're very annoying to coil up. But because these are very big and chunky, it does take a bit of space, so bear in mind that. You of course charge it on this side and you fill up the gas on the other side. There's also another thing, because everyone thinks that the batteries are under here, under the trunk, but they're not, they're under the seats. Under the trunk is of course the gas tank, but it is much bigger than a normal one because it's got a load of electronics which are thinking and looking at the gas vapors. So if you don't drive if you only drive on electricity for about, I don't know, 3 months, there will be a lot of vapors gathering in there. So if you want to fill it up with new gas, the electronics are going to say, wait a second, I'm not going to let you open the tank for about 5 seconds or something like that, because I have to get those vapors out through a special pipe thingamajig. So there's a few advantages if you buy a plug-in hybrid and drive it. Obviously you wouldn't want to buy it and then not drive it, would you? Anyway, the first one is probably pretty obvious, is that if you do mostly city driving, for example, low speed stuff, traffic jams as well, electric motors all excel at that. Well, they excel at everything pretty much, but it's the batteries that are holding them back. So if you'll do mostly city driving, then yeah, your gas bill might actually be zero. Because if you do that and then perhaps plug the car in at work and then plug it back in home, then, well, you pretty much always have it charged. The other advantage is you'll have, let's say, much stronger engine braking, because really it isn't engine braking so much as it is the regenerative braking of the electric motor. So if I let my foot off the gas pedal, the car will go into regenerative braking. It'll be braking the car, slowing it down, and making electricity to fill up the batteries. So win-win. So there we go. I let off the brake and we're slowing down quite considerably. It's not as powerful as a fully electric car, of course, because those have much more powerful electric engines and thus also a lot more regenerative braking. But it is very nice to have this feature, because one of the consequences of that is that you will be saving a lot of your mechanical brakes. The third advantage, which is probably also quite obvious, is that, well, when you are driving on electric power alone, the car is basically an electric car as far as driving is concerned. So it's got, it's very quiet and very comfortable. I've come to really love fully electric cars for that very reason, because they're just so quiet. There's no rumble of the engine. Right now, yes, the internal combustion engine is on. More about that later. But it is very nice if you've never driven in or rode in a electric car, or a plug-in hybrid, for example, which can drive fully electric. I suggest you do, because the experience is quite profound. It is very, very different from your regular car, because it is so quiet and relaxed and nice. And last, but perhaps not least, because this is a plug-in hybrid, and because it has both an internal combustion engine as well as a electric motor, you of course get the best of both worlds, which means that if you want sudden acceleration and power, you've got that, because the electric engine, at least from a standstill here, has got quite a lot more oomph than your normal engine would have. But if you want to drive long distances-ish, then you have the gas engine with a gas tank in the back, and you can do more range. So if you were thinking about what the fuel consumption of this car is and how little can you use, I was thinking the same thing, but then I thought about it a bit more, and I thought this would be a stupid test for one particular reason. Because this is a plug-in hybrid and it's meant for people who, for example, drive to work or drive to the shops, drive to cities, and occasionally take it for a slightly longer spin, the fuel consumption is pretty much zero. Because if you keep driving within your battery range, which is a few 10 kilometers, well, it's going to be fine. You just plug it in and you're basically driving for free. With one caveat, of course. If you go something like 3 months or so, there's a little timer, there's a lot of computers everywhere, including the fuel tank, like I said. The car will say, wait a second, you haven't used any fresh fuel, or you haven't used any fuel, this fuel in the tank is getting old, and you haven't put in any fresh fuel in quite a long while. I'm going to turn on the internal combustion engine, and I'm going to drink that fuel, whether you like it or not, because we need fresh fuel. So that's a nice little safety feature, or I should say feature that will save you money, because you don't really want old fuel going into your engine. So I thought, instead of doing an economy run, because that would be stupid, why don't we do a splurging run? So use as much fuel as possible. Well, not really. We're not going to drive like maniacs. We are going to drive normally, but we're not going to charge this car once. Because just like Renault said, if you're going to buy a plug-in hybrid like this and then never plug it in and never charge it, you're actually going to be worse off than you would be by buying a normal internal combustion engine car. So we've done what? We've done about 500 kilometers with this car and never plugged it in. And we did highway driving, we did normal driving like this, just everything that you would, for example. And well, the average fuel consumption I thought would be a lot higher, because right now it is 5.7 liters per 100 kilometers, which is actually surprising, because when you're driving normally like this, for example 50 kilometers an hour, and you're looking at the current consumption, and when the engine kicks in because it says, well, the battery is too low, we have to charge it, it's actually using about 15 liters per 100 kilometers. But it all adds up, apparently, when you're driving like this, because right now, despite the fact that the battery is almost zero, well, I mean, I'll tell you about that later, but you know, I'm still driving on electric alone, so it's quite surprising. But of course, bear in mind that if you were to be doing this throughout the lifetime of the car, you'd probably get that number pretty high. So yeah, if you buy a plug-in hybrid, plug it in, because that's what it's for. So last but not least, how's the comfort of this car? Well, like I said before, when you're driving on electric alone, it is very, very nice. It's quiet, it's, well, refined really, because there's really no noise. There's a tiny, tiny, tiny whine from the electric motor, but you can barely hear that. So it's very nice. The only minus I would have for this whole plug-in system is that when the internal combustion engine decides to kick in and help along, or when it shuts off, the transition when it engages with the quasi-clutch, whatever it is, isn't as smooth as you'd like. It's not gonna, you know, smash you into the seat or anything, but you can feel it. You will know when it engages and when it disengages, and not just because of the noise. And one last thing before I stop babbling that you have to keep in mind is that this car does not have fast charging. So if you've ever used a fully electric car that does have fast charging, you know that you can usually fill up the batteries in like, well, not fully, but from like 30 to 70 or 80% in about 30 minutes or so. Well, with this car, not so much, because I believe every charge will take about 4 to 5 hours. So there is no fast charging. So the only reasonable solution is to plug it in at night at home and plug it in at work, for example. The plug-in hybrid starts at 31,600 euros, while the fully loaded model comes up to just under 38,000 euros.